자세 영웅 본색 like this 시간과 공간을 구애받지 않는 자세
힘을 타고 쓰러져도 포기 버리고 날뛰는 중
낯이 된 것 같아 선호공 낯이 된 것 같아 선호공 우리는 쉬지 않아 매일 make it 끝까지 가보자 낯이 된 것 같아
I love my team, I love my crew 여기까지 달리면서 I love my team, I love my crew 계속 달릴 수 있어도 I love my team, I love my crew 여기까지 오르면서 I love my team 그 덕분에 우린
맛이 된 것 같아 선호공
알리지 우리는 등장 중 여전히 새들이 뒷박고 멈추지 않아 뒷박 중 발이 꼬여도 뒷박 부려만 근둔 성실히 swing 중
다른 날은 난 늘어나라 하늘로 열이봉 다른 날은 나 우리들의 매일은 coming go 다른 날은 난 모든 걸 위해 나가자고 이 노래에 맞춰
say
Hello, everyone, and welcome to K-Talk with Noona's Noonchi. I hope you're doing well this Wellness Wednesday. There's a reason why I do these on Wednesday. Not really, but Wednesdays are also known as Wellness Wednesdays. If you guys have questions, thank you for joining me. Put them in the chat box because I always like to answer questions as I go along, and sometimes you'll think of something while you have me. So please do put them in the chat box, and I will get to them. First of all, I'll start with some updates. I guess the main update is the tours and me heading back to Korea very soon. In fact, it's like looming every day. And this time it's a little bit different because I will be going on 2 tours. So exciting, and seeing all these people and interacting with everybody. So a lot of that last minute planning is making sure that everybody is ready to go. And I didn't realize how much is entailed in that, and sometimes it can get a little overwhelming. At the same time, I would say heavily involved with the book. Yes, you keep hearing about that book, but it's this book that I am really hoping I put all the K-dramas that people have mentioned. There are going to be times that I will not be able to include everything. I realize that because there's so much content, and then there's more content. In fact, I feel like I'm going to hand in this manuscript and there's going to be so much more K-dramas coming up. Of course, I can't do anything about that. But I just know that I'm trying to get the messages across. I have to keep going back to the reason why I started Noona's Noonchi in the first place, which is to talk about mental health in a fun and creative way through my love for K-dramas and tie them together. And so that's how it came about. And so I just have to go back to that, because when you're writing a book and it becomes all about the book and making it the best, possible thing ever, you tend to lose sight. And that's what's happening to me, is losing sight of why I did this in the first place. So I'm constantly remembering it. Hello, guys. Thank you for saying hello, and trying to remember that this is a good thing that I'm writing this book. And so that's the main update. And then just knowing that in general with my work, this is a kind of a big update, but because everything going on with the book deadline looming, me being in Korea, and then also family, because that is a priority of mine. I have kids and I have to also take care of myself. I have been saying no to a lot more things, or saying I'll think about it. In the past, I would have been like, all right, let me do it, or let me fit it in. I'm an overachiever, and I tell people to make sure you put those boundaries in. I do that, but not necessarily with my work. And so recently I have declined some things. I would say some big things, and I feel okay about it. A little like, no, should I feel guilty? Not as much guilt as I feel like the FOMO, am I missing out? But I'm sharing this with you because it's just a good life lesson of, I'm talking some really big things, like a big potential global talk that could catapult a career in a different direction, mine. But I said no, because it just didn't make sense with the schedule and the strain on everything that I'm doing. Does that make sense? So that was a little bit hard, but once you say no, it gets easier. I want to share that with you. Saying no is tough, especially if you have that, oh, it'll make me look good, or it's good for my work, or it's important for the family, or I need to do it, the obligation. But the more you practice saying no, because it's better for you and what works, and obviously if you take care of yourself, you can take care of others around you. I think I'm a much nicer person and better mom than me cramping everything in, and I just can't do it. So that was the big update for me to share with you guys. Sure, I'd love to give you a hint. God, there's so much. I'll give you an example. Chapters are dedicated to certain mental health conditions. Depression, an entire chapter. Okay. Anxiety, an entire chapter. PTSD, an entire chapter. So that's why you see me like as I'm writing, and my chapters are not like a page, and they can go thousands of words, and to the point that I'm like, because I have editors and stuff, I was like, I'm not editing, because I used to be an editor, I used to be a journalist. I'm sitting there going, maybe I could reword this paragraph. I had stopped doing that because it was really stalling my work, and I'm just going. And so you can imagine if I'm talking about clinical depression, which I was the other day, and put a pause on it and went to something else, like something fun with kids. I was like, oh gosh, this is heavy stuff. And then I'm drawing the K-drama example. So whatever you see on my platform, that's what I'm doing, but I'm doing in much more deeper prose length paragraphs of descriptions with not just scenes, but the overall K-drama and why. So you will see your favorites. You'll maybe see some that you didn't think of, that you watch, that you're like, oh, I didn't know that this showcased this. So hopefully that helped you. And yes, I really hope, what I hope is, this is the hard part. I'm writing from a professional perspective, but also Jeannie Chang, mom, wife, daughter, friend, and it's in all my tone. So it's very, I would say, informal. So I'm not sounding clinical at all, but I'm putting in clinical terms. That's what makes it hard. Like, it'd be different if I was a professor and I'm writing research indicates. I mean, that would just be so much easier. But I'm going, this is what I'm learning. And then here's what clients have said. And here's what followers have said. And this is what I've learned myself in grief. So I'm really putting a lot of personal touches, because what I want to do is not only do you walk away going, oh my gosh, so that's how I could help my friend. Or wow, so this is what's going on with me. And now I feel more validated. But I also want to make people feel emotional. I'm hoping as you read my book, it's like watching a K-drama, not the triggering kind, but the kind that you're like, oh my gosh, it's so heartwarming. That's why. So a lot of my own tears and like stress in this book, but that's what I'm doing. And when I'm on the heavy topics, soon I will be hitting suicide awareness. That's actually next on my list, and I'll tackle it and then go back to something fun. So I'm finding that works for me. I'm like, okay, this is really heavy for like three pages. Let me move on to something else for a break, because I was having a hard time. So it did a number on my own mental health, because I was like talking about things, and I also get personal. So thank you for that. And I hope you want to read it, and it'll come out slated for next spring. So I'm sure, of course, you'll hear about it as it's due for publication soon. So I appreciate that question. Hopefully that answered you. All right, let's move on to my first K-drama deep dive. Before I mention the K-drama, you already know what I'm talking about. I'm going to say it pleasantly surprised me, but I'm not necessarily recommending this for your mental health. Okay. It's called Mask Girl. So I've already told a few of you who have DM'd me about it, that it's not one for you to watch unless you're in a certain zone. I happen to binge the last 4 episodes. I forget what night, a couple nights ago. And it was a good time for me to do that. It pleasantly surprised me, because I was just about to stop after the first 3 episodes. I watched it out of curiosity. I follow trends in Korea, and it was getting some buzz. And I'm like, you know what? It's on now. Let me check it out. No, the first 3 episodes, I was like, no, I'm not recommending this to anybody. And what is this? And I'll be honest, I actually had a nightmare the night I finished episode 3. You can, and I think some followers have mentioned that they had nightmares. Well, I did, and I remember I got up and was so disoriented, but the nightmare had nothing to do with Mask Girl itself, but just a nightmare based on what I was watching, because I didn't watch anything after that. Usually I watch something fun, but I'm sharing that with you because that can happen, and you might not know it's tied to something you're watching, but for me, hands down was, because I was like, oh yeah, I was just watching Mask Girl, and then I fell asleep because I was getting sleepy, and those 3 episodes were very difficult to watch. A lot of sexual trauma there. So on that note, let's talk about why I actually liked it. I would compare it to Squid Game, DP1. I still haven't finished DP2. I want to, I just haven't had time. DP1, My Name with Han So-hee and who's the guy? Gosh, you guys probably remember, but really good looking guy, that he's super awesome. Those are the ones, it's kind of in that caliber. In fact, The Glory is also in that caliber, but The Glory is probably a little bit more jarring and triggering in the first episode. This one, over the first 3 episodes, were the toughest because, to be honest with you, with what I was seeing with the gender roles and gender dynamics. I'm going to start with that. Number one thing is I had trouble with that. This is why I didn't watch it. But I had trouble not because I disagreed. The reality is all this stuff in this K-drama was real. It's real, just like you see in the fun K-dramas like King the Land, which I'm going to talk about shortly. All of that is real. It's just the premises, right? And some of it, it's a little bit more over dramatized. And when you see, especially as a female, and you're triggered by that, and you're seeing sexual assault, and you're seeing the trauma happening, and then you see her feeling so, I guess, down and out about her own looks. And that would be the second theme that I see as realistic: sexual trauma, sexual assault. Then you have the gender role plays that I think would be more patriarchy. And then the beauty industry, or the beauty standards of Korea, or honestly, any medium where you don't look pretty enough, right? And that was the whole point of this main character in the beginning. So that all put that together, and I was like, okay, this is too much. But to conclude, which I'm not going to give spoilers, but overall, this K-drama showed every single theme of a K-drama that you could imagine in that 7 episodes. For instance, I wrote it down here. From the beauty standards that we see, where you see maybe characters being bullied for their looks, or in True Beauty, which I use a lot, where she was bullied for her face. Clearly we know the actress is beautiful, but just she had stuff on her face, right? And it wasn't like a flawless skin. So you see that, but then you also see plastic surgery like it's nothing. And I would say that's a common thing you see in K-dramas. But in Korea, which is, they say it's like the biggest industry, and I believe it, but being there enough times, I don't quite always see that. But I'm not in the plastic surgery space. I don't go into these plastic surgery clinics, so I don't see that. So I was a little like, is that really realistic? But that's high in Korean society in the sense of you get plastic surgery and it's very common. So I understand that. So I wanted to bring that up. Another realistic thing that you see, the gender roles, gender dynamics, very patriarchal, dominant, male dominant, in a very grotesque way. I want to say that also can exist in any society. And in Korean society, still somewhat patriarchal. It's there. So that was a little triggering for me, because it's like, you're hitting the right notes, but just in a grotesque way, right? In a way that's hard to watch. Bullying, also part of the K-drama, very common in all our K-dramas. Revenge, which I would say is probably the factor that keeps you going in this plot. Revenge. And then family dynamics. See, I'm ending on a more hopeful note. And love and family. Thank you, An Bo-hyun. I see that question. Give me a second before I answer that. The way it ended is probably what sold me on the K-drama. So by episode 5, 6, 7, actually, I'm exaggerating, 6 and 7, I was seeing things that I usually like seeing. And it's very different from the webtoon. So I did not read the webtoon. Gosh, if I had time to do that, it'd be great. But I don't have time to read the webtoon, but I heard all about it and know the ending of the webtoon is very different. But this is my opinion. So there are probably webtoon lovers that were like, it's nothing like the webtoon, whatever. But I don't care about that. I'm looking at the story and I'm looking at the themes, and the way it ended is just like how I see K-dramas. Though the ending is on hope. Really, it's very difficult to watch still. So I did fast forward through those violent scenes that you see in DP, Squid Game, My Name, all of that, right? Even in My Dearest, which I'm enjoying, some of the war scenes, fast forward. But overall, I'm looking at the messaging, and I thought it ended on a hopeful note. So to answer your question, Dorothy, do you recommend Mask Girl for someone with PTSD? First of all, anybody who has a diagnosis, such as some trauma-related diagnosis like PTSD, and you are, I would say, in the throes of it, meaning you're trying to manage it and you feel those symptoms in a very strong way. Because by the way, many people live well with PTSD, but it could be some time and their symptoms have dissipated even though they still have that diagnosis. And I see that all the time, and it can come back. So if you are already asking me that question, I would actually say no. I don't recommend Mask Girl for someone with PTSD if you're in the throes of it right now. If you have second thoughts, don't watch it. I just happened knowing and talking to lots of people in Korea and being like, you know what? They're saying it's better as it goes along. And the way and I know the actresses, right? You want to see how the actresses portray the main girl, Momi, and it was very well done. However, I'm not recommending it to watch for your mental health. If you're curious, you can watch it. But there's also, and I'm going to talk about this, women portrayed in K-dramas these days are so different than years ago. And I like it. I actually like the fact that though her acts, the main character didn't do great stuff. So I'm not promoting, for instance, murder. You know, we all know this is a drama based on a webtoon. None of that is condoned, but it's more about how it happened, right? And you understand the character. You're always empathizing. At the end of the day, you're taking sides. I will say the protagonist in this, believe it or not, is the mother of the son. I don't want to give out spoilers. Is Kyungja. I'll just tell you the character Kyungja. There's a whole chapter 3 dedicated to her. She's probably the antagonist. But I'm going to also shed light on her. I analyzed her because she's overwhelmed with grief. Now, grief, just so you know, can manifest in horrible ways. Just because you're with a breakup or a loss of a job or anything, grief can turn you into a hideous person. I'm just going to be honest. If it's unresolved grief. And her character also had unresolved trauma. You'll see it from the past. And I didn't go too deep. I'm not trying to go, oh my gosh, what happened in the past? But you kind of see her story and you kind of feel for her until you see some of her actions. Then you think, okay, this is what happens to somebody who goes unresolved, who honestly doesn't get help. This is a K-drama. You're not going to have a therapist come in going, hey, let's help you out here. You know, it doesn't work. It doesn't work like that. It'd be great. But it didn't make sense in the K-drama. But that's what I wanted you to see with her character. She's the antagonist in my book. That just went off the rocker because of that. And then it just got to way beyond her that she was not thinking. And you see that. And I've seen that in some folks, which is why you have to say to folks, please work on your grief or get some help for it. Unresolved grief can come out in, I would say, very unhealthy behavior. Sometimes terrible coping methods, but they don't know it's grief because they think it's from years ago and they're fine. But there is that. So I wanted to share that with her, with Kyungja. That is the fabulous actress who you see. Why am I so good? I'm bad with names. Someone tell me the actress. She's in everything from Goblin to Uncanny Counter, The Glory. She was the friend in The Glory, the woman who was abused by her husband, that one. She's a great actress, did a great job. She was creepy. So she made it real. Now I'm going to talk about also the main character, Momi. I'm not giving any spoilers, hopefully, but just understanding her trajectory of what she went through. Again, this is also in the synopsis, so it's not a spoiler, but she got basically punishment for what she deserved. So that is what we see. But we just see her story and her own trauma. Think about it. And at the end of the day, it stemmed from her upbringing. So I wanted to conclude by saying upbringing, childhood events. Not necessarily childhood trauma, childhood events where maybe you were told you were flat out ugly. That's how this starts out. Her mom also was like, why would you want to be a dancer? Like, you look this way, you know? I don't even want to repeat things, but that's in that sense triggering because that is so realistic. So in that sense, it's realistic to Korean culture. They're the most blunt people, not so much among strangers, but in their family. And so a lot of us, including me, more women, were told certain things like, oh, like my mom says this all the time, and she does not mean to be insulting, but, oh, why do you look like that? And I'd be like, what? Like, what do I look like? Right? It's like there is a perfectionism in the way we look. We don't have to sit there getting plastic surgery, but it's more like, I think your hair could have been better, or maybe you look really tired. Those are the simple comments, and that's why it was triggering for me. And also just knowing that that is what the reality is of Mask Girl, and that's why it's called Mask Girl. But in conclusion, Mask Girl, think of the title. Mask. I had wished, and I really believe this. It came a little later, and maybe you didn't see that, but I really believed Momi, the main character, was empowered. It just took her years. It took her maybe to go to be punished. I don't want to give out spoilers. Go to where she had to go to be punished. Maybe I'm being too obvious. To figure things out and know that she is empowered. Because at the end of the day, I liked what she did at the end to save somebody in her life, which was her daughter. And that's all I'll say. But that is very important to understand empowerment. Empowerment, let me just share this. And this is based on not just descriptions or definitions. It's really about how you feel about yourself. No one should be the one empowering you. Now, you definitely get encouraged. Like, you guys all encourage me in my work. That is all important. But at the end of the day, I need to feel value in myself and who I am despite everything, right? Who you look like, what you do, your own empowerment, that's empowerment. And then when you feel that way, it shows out. That's why people catch on going, oh my gosh, you're so passionate about K-dramas, because that's my own empowerment. I believe it. That's my core work, my core value. I wanted to end on that note because I've heard from several people, all women, I should say people, it's actually a lot more than several people, about empowerment. And we had great conversations, but there were some misunderstandings. But this is according to me and what I've seen in my work, that you can feel disempowered by people. Definitely. People can insult you, and it's actually very discouraging. You get haters, especially when you think of influencers and people on social media, people in the public eye, very difficult. But you can indeed empower yourself, meaning, you know what, gosh, I have a hater that they're saying terrible things. That's horrific, including my family. But how do I find that core value in who I am and what I believe in, why I think I'm talented? Momi had talent in dancing and all this. She just used it in a way that worked for her, whether you judge it or not. That's not what I'm here to do. I'm here to share that's what worked for her. That's what she could do to, in some sense, empower herself. Because people would think that, oh my gosh, she's disempowered. She was insulted. She was told that she was ugly. I mean, that's what it was. But I just saw it as, well, that's how she was making herself feel better, and that's not unhealthy. It got unhealthy at that point, but it's not unhealthy to do something that works for you. And that's how Mask Girl came about. But overall, the mask is not healthy. And so if there's a way where you can figure out, if you're already masking up, to unmask, and it takes every day. You don't just do it once. So I talked more than I wanted a Mask Girl, but it just brought out a lot of me, including personal things. And plus it is triggering. So no, not recommend for mental health, but if you feel like you want to watch for entertainment, you watch My Name, which I think is just as dark. I would watch it. I do recommend that. But for you, that's my question. No. As a therapist, if you struggle with PTSD symptoms, you're already asking me, do not. And when you're ready, you'll know. Let's move on to King the Land. King the Land. I didn't get to talk about it. King the Land is super fun and light. But one thing I talked briefly and I forgot to bring out, and I want to emphasize because it's in my everyday work, is what Chuno's character said about creating his own story. And then Yuna's character, what is it? Sarang, love her name, Sarang, which means love, was like, I'm going to also create my story. Why am I bringing that up? Two different people in a relationship who are following their own, I would say, beating to their own drum, following their own values and their own passions, but they're together. There's two different misconceptions, I believe, of relationships where you have to give everything up. I've heard that and I'm like, what? No. In fact, that's unhealthy. Be you and make the choice to bring you, including the disagreements and maybe your own values that may not quite align. It's not going to be perfect to your partner or spouse or whoever in your relationship, to have a healthy relationship. And when he said, I'm trying to create my own story, different than maybe his father's story, different than maybe his family story, that is a mental health technique. So one of the things that we do, and depending on the modality you use, the model I use, I love when I ask folks to figure out their story at that moment, maybe chapter 10 to 12. What's chapter 10 to 12? I'll say. They'll be like, okay, it's this right now. A story is talking about people and events and experiences in a descriptive way for teaching purposes or to inspire you or teach others, inspire others, to educate, to entertain. That's a story. But one of the things that they were actually doing, the two characters in King the Land, was they were talking about their story at that moment, but what they're building towards is the narrative. That's what I want to focus on. The narrative, your narrative is, for instance, Jeannie Chang's narrative is mental health and using K-dramas, but at the core of it, it's my own belief, and I'm, it's cool. It's how I use it in my family. I'm talking about core values, right? Your narrative is actually the message that you want to convey to anyone around you. So my narrative is that I'm Korean American and I'm proud of that. And I use that identity in my work. That's today, right? But I had to rewrite those stories over many years going, this doesn't make sense. This doesn't make sense. I'm changing this. So I had different stories and different events that happened that were part of my story. So as Chuno was sharing his own story about building this hotel to be a beautiful workplace, then Chansarang realizing, wait a second, I lost sight of it. This isn't me. I'm great at it. She's great at her job. But she's like, but I want to do something on my own and create that own space. She created that story at the time. And then their narrative is the overarching message we're getting from it, going, wow, so you could be your own person. Or the value is Juno believes in each employee and building this healthy workplace in employees, you know? So I'm sharing that because what is your narrative? If you feel confused in your certain life, rewrite that story, but then what's the overall message? And that's why my book is hard, because I'm like, what is my overall message? My overall message is to improve people's mental health or break through stigma and normalize it. I have to say that each day. So that is the overall narrative. And I wanted to share that in King the Land that I actually thought was awesome in just a conversation or two, but it doesn't matter. It made it great. And now, and that whole K-drama made sense because of their, I would say, mature relationship that you got to see that was fun. And we needed to see something like that. And what I envision happening in the future is that she's doing her own thing. They're married and happily married or whatever, but she's building this hotel. Maybe in some sense, she builds like this conglomerate hotel that becomes a competition with his. I'm laughing, but that can happen. But she's building her own dream. It's never going to be that way because she's not into the commercialism. But overall, that just her own passion, that's her narrative and what she wanted to dedicate, that personal touch. His was building more King the Lands, the hotels, but focusing on the workplace and the employees. That's the narrative. By the way, it's a great example of a workplace drama. So it goes on my workplace list. He does a beautiful job of doing that. Okay, that's King the Land. And I'm going to pause on that, but I'm also going to bring up Moving. Can't wait. On Wednesdays, I'm dying to watch it. So excited to watch it with my kids. We have events tonight, so I'm like, we got to watch it later tonight. I highly still recommend it. It's on Hulu. Great family drama. I cannot wait to see how it unfolds. And I also want to recommend to you Not Others. Nam Nam in Korean. It is on Viki. This is a mother-daughter based drama, I would say, with the other people in between. But I'm going to do a deep dive on this soon. It ends, I believe, today or ended today. And I just have to watch the last episode and a half. But I haven't talked about it much, maybe because sometimes I'm in my own head really enjoying something and just loving the dynamic, and it's progressive. But the mother-daughter relationship is what steals the show, and great example of communication and two empowered women. And so I really like that it breaks the mold of the traditional type of what we see. If you know, Not Others is based on a high school mom. They're obviously now she's, in her middle age, raising her daughter, and they're so close. And you see those dynamics, but you hear a lot about her own story, but her narrative is how she really raised this woman and was proud to do it despite hardship, being her own self. I love the mom. I also love the daughter. I love both actresses. Great job there. But just look at the story and narrative. I mean, that's the crux of my work. And how do you define that for yourself? So I recommend that Moving on Hulu, Not Others on Viki. Viki in the US, because it's obviously different across the world. Okay, quickly, because I realize time flying, K News Talk. This article in the Korean Herald, I like the Korea Herald. They're doing a series called Hello Hangul, which is language, Korean language. And you can't really see what this article is saying, but I love that they're analyzing the growth in people learning Korean language. I mean, how many of you are learning Korean language? Okay. I'm not, because I kind of already know it, but I'm sitting there going, I think I need to learn it, relearn it, because I have all the basics and it's about practice, but that's what I want to talk about. What some of these experts are saying is learning a language like Korean is more than just the textbooks and learning in classes. My son went to Yonsei for the entire summer. He went to learn Korean language. Yonsei is a top university. But what we all didn't like that they were still doing since 1992 was a traditional way of learning the language. So he said he learned more Korean language outside the classroom. Why? You're speaking in real life. You're speaking with friends. You're in restaurants. That's the learning. And that's what these experts are saying. And why am I bringing that up? Because they were saying the number one thing that brought out the increase in people learning Korean is K content. Yeah. Of course, no surprise, right? Did you start learning Korean because you started listening to BTS, K-pop, or started watching K-dramas, and you realize, I'm starting to pick up words. What else can I learn, right? And so I am bringing that up. I'm not justifying you guys watch more K content, but the truth is that's how you learn outside of the traditional. You do need to learn the alphabet, of course. All of that is, I'm not, discounting the traditional learning. But now, even with us and me and my husband, who that was our first language, Korean, we get more out of it by actually practicing, and then even going, what? Like, what are you saying? So many times I'd be like, what did you just say? Like in Korean, because they're speaking fast and then they're just like, and then, but that's okay. And then I'll be like, oh, I see what you're saying. And that's the practice. And then me sitting in on business meetings and being like, okay, I don't know what that word means, and just catching on. But it's about using your skills to do that. And that's what they're saying. But they're saying K content is the key. So I'm bringing it up because that's the belongingness. In this love for K content, why did I do these tours? Learning Korean language. I do hope some of you who are joining me will learn the Korean. You'll pick up some things right away. Some of the nuances, the bowing. By the time you're said and done, you'll start bowing everywhere. You'll start bowing even when no one's watching you. I'm laughing, but it's a habit, right? I started doing it here in the US. Like I have to stop myself, and I'm like, oh, now I could just say hello. But it's funny, but it's just part of the culture. But that's all learning from the K content you watch, or hearing your favorite idols' lyrics and learning that and learning those nuances. And that's what this language series is saying. So I'm bringing that up because especially this article was saying number one reason for the love of Korean language was through the K content. And so I think you guys would agree, right? And that just justifies my work. That's all. It was like that's why I do K dramas. That is why this is why I see this increase. I think they're saying it's one of the most learned languages now, but it's still failing. I think trailing behind Chinese and Japanese just a little bit, but still that's huge. And that's part of my book because I had to talk about the growth. Years ago, I'm going to conclude on this personal note. Years ago, no one knew that I was Korean. Do you know the biggest thing I had to do growing up was like going, no, I'm Korean. They'd be like, are you from China or Japan? I was like, no, I'm from Korea. Like, hello, do you not know this country? They'd be like, Korea. I kid you not. Growing up, I grew up in the 80s, early 90s before I went to college. That was the thing. They were like, Korea, like they didn't know about it. And so why I shared that in my book and knowing the trajectory of Korean language. And now when folks are texting me things in Korean, I'm like, did you just text me in Korean? That's amazing. And so that's that article series. I highly recommend it. Korea Herald on social media, or you just read their articles and they're doing a whole series about the language. Don't worry. You don't also need to take a class. My son was in like 6 weeks of classes and he had perfect attendance, and he still said that he learned more outside the classroom. So you could take a class and maybe learn the basics, but if you really want to practice with each other. So let's increase that belongingness. And again, I say this because I don't want to sound like I'm making mistakes. I say this and I'm like, you know what, forget it. I'm going to make a mistake as a Korean American. Like I've said stuff. And in fact, in a whole business meeting, I said the word for embarrassment in a very informal way, and they all cracked up. And I went, oh, did I say the wrong word? They said, yeah, you said the informal word. And I'm like, okay, but it was not cracked up because they were laughing at me. I think they were just generally, pleased by me trying. And so I think that's important. And you'll see that in Korea. In fact, they'll be so impressed. If you're non-Korean speaking Korean, they'll love you. Just trust me. But so I had to talk about that. So yes, keep watching and keep practicing, and maybe take off the subtitles and see if you get the gist. I do my best to turn off the subtitles, but sometimes it's on naturally. And then I'm like, oh, but when I don't have it on, I'll forget that it's not on. So maybe you'll get to that point and you'll just get the general gist until I go, what did they just say? And I don't understand, especially the legal dramas. Guys, thanks so much for listening. I was trying to go under 30 minutes, but I didn't. So lots to share. Yes, the article in the Korea Herald social media is Hello Hangul series. Hangul, Hangeul. Hangul means Korean language. And I highly recommend it. And they're just doing, I would say I've seen like 3 or 4 articles on it. They're just talking about the journey of the Korean language and what it looks like and what they're hoping to see and how it impacts the economy. Everything comes down to business. And so think of more people investing in Korean language classes, right? I know lots of people in Korea taking Korean language classes that are foreigners living there. And so in some sense, I'm like, I probably need to do that too. But I'm in a weird state. I'm like intermediate, like writing, but then like elementary speaking, and then some of the slang I'm advanced. So I don't know where I'd fit in for classes. Yeah, I hope that helped. All right, guys. In conclusion, I just want to say thank you for joining me on my show. I hope if there's stuff that you want to hear me talk about, let me know. You'll know that I'll always include a deep dive and news comments. I think I'm really enjoying that because that's the journalist in me, and I'll always follow things and trends, and I'll give you as much updates I can. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Until then, take care of yourselves. When I talked about the boundaries in the beginning, my own experience of saying no It's very empowering. So if you want to just be empowered, you feel like, gosh, if you feel that stress of you saying something like yes or doing something, why not practice that no? And that would be my little call to action for you. Saying no just could be, it doesn't have to be no like meanly. It could just be like, how about you ask me next time? Or let me think about it. I love the let me think about it. I'm like, oh, she just told me that she's going to think about it. But that's you being empowered to be like, let me think about it in my own time. And I feel okay thinking about it. And that's important for your mental health. Thank you guys. I'll see you next week or on Instagram or wherever. Bye.